guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory, says Psalm 73:24. Good morning and welcome to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLake, here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing you the good news on business. I'd like to welcome not only our regional listeners, but our national and international listeners as well, those of you who tune in via the internet on tandemradio.com. It's great to have you listening. For those of you who might be listening for the first time, our show has a very simple concept. We have two simple goals each week. The first goal is to point out in Scripture where God has a message for you or wisdom for you for your business. We're a business-oriented show. I have a business background. Not only do I do this show, but I own several businesses, and I also write a business column that's read throughout the area. And I love business, but I love the Lord first, and that's most important to me. And with that in mind, I've always sought His wisdom and His insights, and certainly His scriptures, and how they apply to my business life, not just my personal life. And so with that in mind, we created Tandem Radio. And what we talk about is scriptures that relate to business, and we're excited about that. And our other goal, our second goal, is to bring in guests each week, and through those guests, through their wisdom and experience with God and with their experience with their work, find little nuggets of wisdom that can benefit you in your business. We have a very practical aspect of the show, where hopefully Monday morning you can take something that you learned today and use it right at your place of business. Whether you own a business, want to start a business, or you're just working in business, which most people are, we want to be there for you and help you. And so we're here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with the good news on business. And of course, each week when we bring in a guest, we have a topic for that guest. And today's topic is labor relations. We're actually going to be talking in a minute to Sal Santiago, who is a senior trial attorney at the National Labor Relations Board and serves on the New Jersey State Advisory Board for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and also serves as vice president of the board of Inspire Sports Camps, which that's a lot to cover, and we probably won't get to it all in today's show, but we'll do our best, and we're going to introduce Sal to you in just a minute. As we do each week, God puts scriptures on my heart for the show, and we read those scriptures to start the show, and the show kind of flows in that area. Sometimes these scriptures, I say, God, I know exactly what you're talking about here. It ties right into the theme. And sometimes I go, where is this coming from? But you know what? God always ties it together, and it always ends up to His glory, which is our goal here. So let's just read you the scriptures for today. 1 Kings 12:14. He followed the advice of the young men and said, my father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. Malachi 3:5. So I will come to put you on trial. I will be quick to testify against sorcerers, adulterers, and perjurers, against those who defraud laborers of their wages. And it goes on, but that was the point I wanted to make. Mark 20:13-15. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who has hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? With those scriptures in mind, let me introduce to you Sal Santiago. Good morning, Sal. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you got a lot going on. Sal, your first time on the air with us. Why don't you take a minute and just introduce yourself to our audience?
It's really quick, Glenn. My name is Sal. I'm a native of Philadelphia. I moved to New Jersey a few years ago to start a career in labor law. I'm an attorney practicing at the National Labor Relations Board, as you eloquently presented earlier. And obviously our agency is an agency that has gotten national attention recently because of some of the board decisions that have come out. And it's also unfortunate. Back in the 40s and the 50s, people knew who we were as an agency, the independent agency that we are. However, recent history has shown that with the decline of labor, decline of unionization across the nation, it used to be at its climax in the 1950s. It was private sector businesses were organized about 30%, maybe 40%. You're talking about the latest 8%. Of private sector employees are organized. And so with the decline, there's also been a rapid decline of knowledge of who we are as an agency, what we do, and why do we exist. However, unfortunately or fortunately, some decisions have come out, put us in national spotlight. We are in the in the spotlight with some national politicians. There's disputes amongst Republicans and Democrats of whether or not our agency should exist in the first place. But we thank God that the EPA is before us because they're the #1 hit list. We're #2, but that's what we do. And on top of that, I also run, as you said, I'm vice president of an organization called Inspire Sports Camps. And that organization is dedicated to bringing out young people from inner cities into a sports camp environment.
Very interesting. So let's start with you, Sal, if we could. Why did you become attorney? Why a career in law?
It was really simple, Glenn. I was a kid. I still remember this idea. I was 8 years old. My brother was going to Penn State. We happened to be, my parents and myself, picking up my brother in a bus depot. There was a homeless guy sitting on a bench. I began as a kid very loquaciously talking to the guy, and he turned to me and he said, "You know, kid, you're good with words." And I looked at him, shocked and surprised, and I said, "Why do you say that?" He goes, "Because you talk to anyone. You talk to me. I'm a bum." As a 7-year-old kid, you don't know what a bum is or a homeless person, and so his term kind of flew over my head. But he said, "You should become an attorney." That stuck. That principle, that concept stuck in my mind. And since that day, I said, not knowing what an attorney was or what it did, or what they do, just it stuck in my mind, and that's when I wanted to become an attorney.
You never know where God's going to speak to you, right?
Absolutely.
That's funny. It reminds you of a story when I was traveling in Seattle before I'd come to know the Lord, and right before my conversion, I was getting a shoe shine. And I'll never forget, I looked down, there's a Bible on the guy's shoe shine stand that he had. And it was on the middle corner, a street corner in Seattle. And I said to him, "That's interesting. You have a Bible here?" And he goes, "Yeah, you know what Bible stands for?" I said, "No." He goes, "Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth." And I never forgot that. It stuck in my mind. And then, it wasn't weeks later that I came to the Lord and I just dug into the Word. But it's funny how those little things, at a young age, you were told you're going to be an attorney. Great for you. So now, how'd you decide labor law? I mean, obviously there's a lot of different areas you could go, right?
Labor law was a labor of love. What happened was my parents, my father was a shop steward. I didn't know what a shop steward was. I didn't know what he did. I just knew he worked at a factory in Philadelphia. And he would come and tell me about arguments that he would have between himself and either a manager or supervisor or a boss. And he would describe these things at the dinner table. Of course, as a kid, not having much knowledge, I didn't know much about it. When I was in law school, I went out to a fair, a nonprofit fair, and they were sitting next to me, literally. The providence of God's hand was upon me. Sitting next to me was a guy named Art Reed. At the time, I didn't know who Art was. And I started just filling out, there was a listing of all of the employers who were going to do interviews that day, and I started looking and, checking off which ones I wanted to interview with. One of the ones that I checked off was his organization. He just happened to be sitting next to me. He looked over, he leaned over, he looked, he saw that I had checked it off. He said, "Do you know anything about them?" I said, not at all. It just sounds interesting from the description. He said, "Tell me why you chose it." I gave him an explanation why I chose it. He said, "Do you speak Spanish?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "You have a job." I said, "Who are you?" And he said, "My name is Arthur Reed. I'm from Friends of Farm Workers in Philadelphia, and you have a job, and you're hired." And I said, "Okay." That's the interview.
There goes the interview for you, right?
Absolutely.
And ever since then, you've been on that course.
I have been. From there, that organization dealt with farm workers, mostly organizing mushroom workers in Reading, Pennsylvania, and also in other areas in the Kenneth Square area in Pennsylvania. And I learned everything I needed to know about labor law from him.
Wow, interesting. And then from there, did you go to National Labor Relations Board?
No, from there I actually got I stuck with a prominent New York City law firm called Vladeck Waldman, Elias Engelhardt, in the center of Times Square. I did a summer there in '98. and perhaps was one of the best summers of my life. I got introduced to a few very prominent New York labor law guys, Erwin Bluestein, Hannon Coco, and Ivan Smith, and kind of just soaked in every lesson that I could possibly take from those guys.
And then, so what brought you eventually to the National Labor Relations Board?
Well, it was interesting. Again, it was one of these things. You know, I grew up in a Christian home. My father was a leader in our church. He taught us, you know, that, you know, God was faithful. He taught us to pray to Him. He taught us to rely and trust in God to open doors, and that's exactly what we did, and that's exactly what I did. I remember my third year in law school, I was just seeking the Lord and praying to Him and asking, where do you want me to go? Where do you want me to be? And it was at that moment my law professor kind of asked me, what are you doing? Do you have a job? And I said, you know, there's some things, there's some fire and, you know, some wood in the fire, and I'm not sure if I want to go in that direction. And she said, have you ever given thought to go into the National Labor Relations Board? I said, no, not at all. I applied, and God opened the door.
So that was early in your career?
It was very early in my career.
Wow, so that's been your path since.
Yes.
Well, we have so much more to talk about, and believe it or not, we're through the first segment already, so we're going to come back right after these messages. You're listening to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLakian, here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing you the good news on business. Don't forget, tandemradio.com is just a powerful resource. It's filled with information that can help you with your business. We have archived shows there, so if you have a topic specific that's concerning you and your business, you can go watch a guest or hear a guest from there. You can see videos of what we do in the studio as well, if that's of interest to you. Most importantly, you can contact us there at info@tandemradio.com, info@tandemradio.com. You can send us your questions. We love to hear from you. You might have a topic for a show we want to talk about, or you may have a question about your business that we can help you with, and we'll certainly pray about your business and do everything we can to help you in that respect. info@tandemradio.com. We'll be back right after these messages. Welcome back to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLakian, here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Bridge FM radio stations, which cover the Northeast, as well as at Tandem Radio. You can actually listen live at tandemradio.com, or you could get the app on your iPhone or on your Droid and listen anywhere you would like in the world, actually. So exciting stuff out there. But anyway, welcome back. We're here with our guest today, Sal Santiago, who's a senior trial attorney at the National Labor Relations Board and serves on the New Jersey State Advisory Board of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And we've been talking to him about his career as an attorney and why labor law. So welcome back. And Sal, thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you again, John.
It's got so much to do, so much to cover here. We're never going to cover it all in one show, so I'm excited about some of the topics, so we'll try to cut right through. How is labor law different from general law? Obviously, you know, you had a choice. You're in law school. You're ready to come out. Why go? We talk about why, but what's the difference between labor law and general law?
Well, I had an interest in civil rights, and it was blending the interest in civil rights and just wanting to help people. I've always had a heart for folks who are underprivileged, had a heart for folks who are underrepresented, and this sort of combined my passion to make sure that the little guy got a little piece of the pie. And there's so many segments of law. I mean, you have business, you have corporate, you have taxation, you have mergers and acts that go under corporation as well. You can go family law. I was really never interested in any of that stuff in law school, although obviously as a course study, you have to take that stuff. Right. It's sort of, it gives you a well-rounded legal education. But really what stirred me was dealing with people and dealing with laws that really truly affected folks at the ground level. And when I was presented the opportunity to work with labor law, it just sort of just resonated with my heart, that I would be combining my passion for Christ, my passion for people, and then my passion for the law.
Now, you work for National Labor Relations Board right away as a business owner. You know, I think labor, right? And so, but not knowing for sure, which way do you work? I mean, do you work more for labor, you work more for management, do you do both?
We're an independent agency, we're neutral parties. Of course, you have your politicians out there who would would disagree with me, and I wouldn't say rightly so. I think we're neutral parties. We just look at the facts. We look at the facts, we look at the law, and we see whether or not there's a violation of federal law, labor law.
Right.
You know, like I was saying in the segment, I think we've gotten a bad rap recently with the Bowen case, which is the Washington State case of Boeing trying to move their facilities to South Carolina. But yeah, we've gotten some really bad publicity because of that.
Now let's talk about that for a minute, since you brought it up.
Absolutely.
What was the deal there? Let's be more specific. I mean, obviously Republicans went nuts over that, and they implied, and I don't know if that's true or not, that the president, set you on that course to give Boeing a hard time, and that's obviously at least my perception of what I've heard. Tell us what really happened there.
Well, what happened was Boeing and the Machinists Union have had a relationship for quite some time, over 50 years. They were negotiating new contracts out in Washington. Boeing had made some representations during negotiations that if they didn't get certain concessions, that they would move out of the state some of their plants. At least that's the facts that we have. And later on, after the contract was signed and sealed and delivered, they moved portions of their business from Washington to South Carolina, in an effort to avoid their collective bargaining obligations. Obviously, the state of Washington is very unionized, at least in Seattle, and Boeing happens to be one of the larger employers in that area. South Carolina, not so organized and not so unionized, and so the theory was that they were trying to avoid their collective bargaining obligations up in Washington, and because they didn't like the union atmosphere there, they moved to a non-union atmosphere where they could get a better deal. And so it's just traditional labor law, it's classic textbook stuff that you can't move. And so essentially, in a very simplistic way, what the remedy would be is that you bring the stuff back. And that's what the National Labor Relations Board was trying to do in an effort to bring the work back to the folks that it belonged to.
Well, from a management standpoint, doesn't Boeing have a right to do that?
It does. However, if they would have done it, at least the allegations, and I don't know all of the facts, I don't know all of the testimony, you can't do it for unlawful reasons. Okay, if you decide to pack up today from New Jersey and you want to start a business out in California, you can do it as a business owner. You can close down and you can move. However, if I'm doing that, and it's called a runaway shop, if I'm doing that to get away from the unions, and I make statements to that effect, it's just unlawful and it's bad practice.
Right.
It's sort of like when the Bible talks about unbalanced scales.
Right.
Okay, it's an unbalanced scale.
What if a company wanted to just move out of the country? I mean, would for example, if Boeing wasn't moving to South Carolina, I don't want to get a whole topic, we can do a whole show on it, but Boeing was not moving to South Carolina, and they said, we're going to move our plant to Mexico. Would they be up against the same
Against the same issues, yes.
And what was the outcome in that case?
The outcome of the case is that the agency and Boeing settled. I'm not quite sure what the settlement was. I don't know what the settlement terms were. I wasn't personally involved with the case. It did settle at a national level.
And they did open the facility in South Carolina?
Partially.
Yeah, okay. So, okay, good. So, interesting. So now, where are cases where you've, that's a good example of labor, right? What about from the management standpoint?
I mean, most of our cases, our case intake, are sort of operate in this way, very simplistic. I mean, I don't want to do a course in labor law, but basically this is what happens. At some point, there's an election that takes place at a place. employees have a choice. It's either, vote for the union, vote against the union, cast, or not to cast any ballots for either party. What normally happens, it's called an organizational drive or a union drive. In that context, what you have is there's a lot of violations, and it's a very simple acronym, but this is the acronym. It's called TIPS. Employers can't threaten, interrogate, promise, or survey their employees' activities. Threaten. You can't make a threat against someone. You can't say, listen, if you unionize, you're going to be fired. You can't interrogate someone about what their activity is. You can't sit someone down and say, hey, do you know anything about the union? What's going on? Are you involved in the union? You can't make any promises. Hey, if you don't vote for them, I'll give you a bonus, or I'll give you an increase in your wages, or I'll fix what you're complaining about. I'll make the improvements. I can't survey their act. I can't stand behind a wall looking at them, or going where they're having meetings and seeing who's involved in this. It's very simple. It's called TIPS. You can't do any of that in a union organizing drive if you're an employer.
Now, you said that unions at one time were up to 30% of the workforce. Now they're down to 80% of the workforce. Is that a continuously dropping number, you think?
Absolutely.
And why do you think that is?
I mean, it's partially, obviously these are my opinions, not the opinions of the agency.
Right.
I think that there's a combination of, unions have shot themselves in the foot a little bit with some of their, some bad publicity that they have received. I think there's a misunderstanding from an employee standpoint as to what the benefits of coming together as a collective group of individuals. I think as a national consciousness, we've lost the art of negotiation and the importance of negotiating as a collective group of folks. I think that's, I think it's not only isolated to labor law. I think it's really has impacted and the society in general.
Do you think management has seen that it's better to treat your employees better, and then therefore that people don't feel there's as much of a need for unionization?
I think there's a combination. Here's the combination. There are strategies that have been developed, and it's called union avoidance strategy. And part of it is to give employees exactly what they would get under a union contract, or somewhat make it somewhat equitable, or close to. And so, employers are much more savvier in their technique. There's also those out there who would say that because of the remedies that the board has, that there isn't any bite. We have a lot of bark, but there's no bite. And employers aren't afraid to come against us in any way because the remedies are slaps in the wrist.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure there's a lot more that we could cover in that area. We're right to another segment, of course, so we're going to come back after these messages. Thank you, Sal, for being here this morning. You're listening to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLakian, again here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing you the good news on business, and that's what we're all about here, sharing God's Word with you. And we have our scriptures again today, which we'll read right after this break. And we have so much more coming up. Don't forget the new format starting in May. We're just excited that we have new people on the air, the show's expanding, and so much more going on, and you just got to stay tuned and hear all about it. Facebook, check us out at Facebook. Go on Facebook and type in Tandem Radio, just Tandem Radio. All you have to do is type in, and we'd love to hear from you. You can put posts up there so other business owners can see what you're doing and how you're doing it. You can reach out to us and let us know that you're out there. We'd love to hear from you. So stay tuned. We have a lot more right after these breaks. Some good Christian business owners want to tell you about what they do. Welcome back to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLakian, here on another segment here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But that's going to change come May, and we're excited about that. We're going to a 90-minute format, but we'll talk more about that. Let's get to the scriptures once again. 1 Kings 12:14. He followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." It's funny because we were talking about national labor relations, and I said to myself, there's an example of how not to deal with your employees, so I thought that was a good one. Malachi 3:5. So I will come to put you on trial. I will be quick to testify against sorcerers, adulterers, and perjurers, against those who defraud laborers of their wages. I thought that was so curious that God put in the same sentence as sorcerers, adulterers, and perjurers, people who defraud their laborers. And I think that's so relative to what we're talking about today. It's just so wrong as business owners to take advantage of your employees. There's no doubt about that. And it will not serve you well, I can assure you. Mark 20:13-15. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who is hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? That guy had to be a capitalist when he said that, for sure, and I thought it tied in well to what we're talking about. We're here today with Sal Santiago, who is a senior trial attorney at the National Labor Relations Board, and serves on the New Jersey State Advisory Board of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and also serves as vice president of the Board of Inspire Sports Camps, which we're going to talk about also in the upcoming segment. Sal, again, good morning, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Sal, we've talked a little about labor. Let's talk specifically to the small business owner for a minute and give him some practical insights. Is there a place for the small business owner, or a reason for the small business owner to come to you at the National Labor Relations Board?
There can be there's a mirror of things that can arise in a small business owner. Let's say, for instance, they catch wind that employees are organizing. What I would suggest to them is that they study up, they make no mistakes, because sometimes when you're dealing with stuff as a small business owner, you don't have the luxury of having attorneys on at your wait,
right,
at your beck and call. You just don't have the money sometimes, and so you start thinking logically. Well, what do the employees want?
Right.
What is it that they want? And so, as just a natural, it's just naturally, for some folks, it just kind of flows out, and you just sit down and you start talking to people, or you round up a bunch of people, and you say, hey guys, what is it that you want?
Right.
What's the complaint? That onto itself, if employees are organizing, is called solicitation of grievances. It's a violation of the law. Okay. It's that simple. And what I would tell folks, small business owners, is to be very, very careful and tread carefully before talking to any employees. Okay, there is something called 8C. Okay, these are just statute numbers. It's section 8C, and that is a freedom of speech section of our act. And basically, you can tell employees that unionization is not beneficial, right, to your small business or your business. And so you have certain rights to tell, okay? But it has to be opinion. Right. It has to be your opinion. And you have to couch it in a way that it comes off as saying, hey, these are my opinions as to why. These are my philosophical reasons as to why unionization is not good. Right. Okay? And so, but before doing all of that, what I would say and recommend to someone is, hey, take a step back from the issue, get yourself, some representation, talk to someone if you can't afford it. There are certain organizations out there. The Chamber of Commerce has some free resources that you can go to and ask the questions.
Now, does the National Labor Relations Board have any programs or any education or anything that the business owner, the small business owner, can come to them and say, hey, I have a concern?
We have what we call a outreach program. Just recently, about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, the acting general counsel down in Washington, D.C., Leif Solomon, really is pushing this outreach to get the information out, who we are, what we do. I actually happen to be the outreach coordinator for our office. And so what you do is you call any of the regional offices, you ask them if they can send out a representative to make a presentation, and we go out free of charge to make a presentation about what labor law. And you can give us the topics that you want us to cover. Sometimes the people won't know, they just say give us a general overview. Sometimes they say, hey, specifically, there's been a gigantic push for protected concerted activity, which is meant for folks who don't have unions but come collectively. See, this is the nuance in our law. It's not only folks who are unionized labor forces, but it's individuals who come together to complain about their terms and conditions of employment are also covered under a National Labor Relations Board. And that's called in our world, it's called PCA. In general world, it's called protected concerted activity. Folks coming together, complaining concertedly about their work, about the terms and conditions of their employment, about something in their realm of the workplace that they're not satisfied with.
Now, so you really don't get much from the management side, people, who own a business saying, I got a problem with my employees, I need you to help me out with.
What you do have is that you have employers who have problems with unions.
Okay.
So let me give you a brief example. Let's say a union, and this happens mostly in the construction industry. You're out there, you hire some non-union contractors to do some stuff. The union comes out and they picket you.
Right.
Okay, they picket your work site, trying to stop folks from entering in and really just putting a halt.
Right.
And thwarting the progress of the project. That is if the object of the picketing, okay, is for representation, they have 30 days. They can stand out there for 30 days for representation. But what they normally do, listen again, this is my generalization and this is my opinion. What they generally do is they picket for area standards. Area standards are basically, hey, this is what folks in this area get paid, and this is what these employees should be getting paid.
Right.
You're undercutting the area standards, and so they go out there and they picket for area standards. And what employers can do, they have a couple options. What they can do is what they call a common situs. So basically, you have a project.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a common situs. And so what you do is you develop a gate system. Gate A is all the non-union contractors. And the notice postings have to be clear. It has to mention who they are, who comes through there. And then Gate B would be all of the union contractors. Okay? And they would only be able to picket where they have their dispute. So if their dispute is with XYZ contractor, they have to picket in front of the gate where XYZ is.
Okay.
They can't picket on the other one. Now, what happens? Let's talk practical. What happens is that they'll picket at both.
Right.
And so the business owner then, or the company, has to come to us and file a charge, and we go out there and we investigate. We see what happens. And then we talk to the union and get their position as to what happened. And they can say, hey, listen, the gate got tainted, meaning that the non-union contractor passed through that other gate, or there's some other evidence. I mean, sometimes we have, you have some picketing violence. Sometimes you have some threats. Hey, if you happen to pass through this gate, something may happen to you.
Right.
Something along those lines. But normally that's what happens.
And not to be off topic, but where does prevailing wage come into all this?
Prevailing wage is actually, it's New Jersey statute.
Specific to New Jersey?
Not only in New Jersey, across the nation. Let me just give you a very simple example of what prevailing wage is. It's any time there is a municipality, a state agency project. What are we talking about? Let's talk practical terms where people can understand. School construction.
Right.
Okay? There's a project in school construction. Well, every state has prevailing wage rates, meaning, hey, if you're a laborer, this is how much you should get earned. And basically what it is it's a hourly salary plus the benefits that person would have gotten if they would have been union.
Right.
Okay? So in a prevailing wage, you're talking about, I think for laborers in New Jersey, it's like $39 an hour. Okay, some of these guys can be earning $12. I'll give you a very interesting, it's interesting that you mention this, because a few years ago I had a case, I won't mention who the employer was, but there was a case where it was a prevailing wage job, doing some schools construction, masonry work, and what the employer was doing was pocketing the money, the extra money. So they would pay folks by check, then tell these individuals, telling these individuals to give them money back.
Right.
And so they were pocketing the $20. You know, they were paying their guys $12 to $15, and then pocketing the rest for themselves.
Right.
And what we found, there was a violation. Some people found out about it. Unions went out there, told these guys, "Hey, you're supposed to be getting $39, not the $12. You're basically being stiffed." They came to us and told us because they complained to the employer and then they got fired.
Incredible. Well, I want to talk more about that topic, but we just don't have enough time. But there's so many questions in that area that I have, actually. But I thank you for letting us know those insights. We have so much more to talk about. We still have to get to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which I know is a topic that's important to you, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. And a few other things. I wanted to see how many Christian lawyers you come across in your career, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. You're listening to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLakian, here every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Looking at a new format coming up in May, which I'm very excited about. And don't forget to check out Ask Tandem. Go on YouTube and just type in Ask Tandem, and you'll see Cooper Ford there and his program. It's a great show. You'll enjoy it. Check it out. Take a view. And stay tuned. We have a lot more right after these messages from some of the sponsors that support this show. Welcome back to Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLakian. And today we have our guest in the studio, Sal Santiago, who is a senior trial attorney at the National Labor Relations Board and serves on the New Jersey State Advisory Board for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and also serves as vice president of the Board of Inspire Sports Camps. And this is a great show if you're having, especially if you're having labor issues. You may want to listen to the show over again on tandemradio.com and catch the archive there. And Sal's a good contact, and we'll have a link to Sal's information on our website. So if you need information from the Labor Board, you can certainly reach out to Sal and find out more. But Sal, you're involved in a lot of things. Let's talk about something I know it's near and dear to your heart, New Jersey State Advisory Board of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Tell us how you got involved in that.
Basically what happened, I was part of what they call Leadership New Jersey, which is a leadership program in the state of New Jersey. Through this, I met a lot of contacts. I was pretty young when I did it. It's one of those God things. It's one of those things that God has allowed me to experience. In meeting folks and having conversation, and obviously spending a whole year with some of these individuals, one of the individuals got in contact with me to serve on what they call the Center for Hispanic Policy Research and Development here in the state of New Jersey. I served on that board for quite some time under two governors, McGreevey and partially under Corsine. And from there, my name was out there somehow, I'm assuming, and I got a phone call from the U.S. Commission, and they asked whether or not I would put a application in, and I said, no problem. I put my application in, and I was accepted. It has to be approved by D.C., and has to be approved by senators, U.S. senators here in New Jersey, and I became a member and have been since. We did some really good work the last few years. We put out some reports on immigration. We put out a report on school funding issues. Those were two reports that we did just recently.
Now, how many people are on the board?
The board itself consists of about anywhere, I believe there were 18 to 20 individuals who serve on the board.
And is that something you do independently, or you all come together collectively and work on this thing?
So what happens is we take testimony. Sometimes we take up a specific issue. We get witnesses to come in to give their side of the argument. We make sure that whatever topic that we cover, that we get a span of individuals from all angles, and then we do our own research. And we come up with our recommendations for the board, for the U.S. Commission down in D.C.
And so these recommendations go to lawmakers and they decide what to do with them?
No, it goes to the independent panel.
Okay.
The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights is an independent agency down in D.C. So we make our recommendation, and they're the ones who approve or don't approve.
And then what happens to that? I mean, how does it get to being law?
It doesn't. It's a published report.
Okay.
It's not legislative at all.
Oh, okay.
It's a public report that's issued, for each state. Each state has a advisory committee, and there's certain reports that are put out there, and you can read the report and see our recommendations of what we think that lawmakers, either federally or in the state, should do
Okay.
on civil rights issues.
So is this something that the average person would have benefit reading from, or is it?
Oh,
primary?
absolutely, it's
Yeah.
all public.
Yeah. And what's the benefit of looking into this stuff?
Well, there are certain issues. I mean, it's sort of like we're a think tank of 20 experienced individuals coming from all different parts of life, looking at specific issues. We have business people, we have conservatives, we have liberals, we have folks in the middle. You have a span of folks who are looking at an issue and coming up with ideas and coming out with recommendations as to how to tackle some of the issues that we face on civil rights issues, nationally and statewide.
Interesting, very interesting. Let's divert from that for a minute. And, we all hear the jokes about lawyers, right? And we know it can be a tough industry and a tough field. Do you meet a lot of Bible-believing lawyers like yourself?
I have to unfortunately say no. Not many, not at all. Very few. However, it has allowed me a platform to talk to other attorneys about Christ, what makes me different. I pride myself on being a straight shooter. I pride myself on being truthful and forthright, and I try to conduct myself in that way. Of course, Glenn, all of us, we fail on occasions. However, I try to apologize when I fail, and try to show them something different.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that more Christians don't gravitate to the field?
I'm not sure if it's more Christians don't gravitate to the field as much as just you have individuals who think that attaining glory, it's one of those vanaglorious positions.
Right.
It's bringing attention to yourself, and I think that's most attorneys are very confident, and most attorneys are bright individuals. I'm not saying that everyone, every attorney is a bright individual, but for the most part, educated, schooled, and I think there's some of that natural tendency to believe that you're better than someone else, or you're smarter, or more able, and more capable, and you sort of become your own God. And I'm not saying that that's what happens, but you may not verbally express that, but in your actions, that's what you express. And I think you sort of have to guard yourself against that tendency.
Let's talk real quick about Vice President of the Board of Inspire Sports Camps. First off, why, and second off, what is Inspire Sports Camp?
Inspire Sports Camp is what takes up most of my time outside of work. It's absolutely one of those things that is a life mission for myself and the president of the board. His name is Kurt Swars, and our board generally. What we intend to do and what we wanted to do, we started out as an organization that did foreign missions trips. We took kids, college-age kids, to El Salvador to start sports camps, soccer camps. The Lord turned our hearts a few years ago, about 2 years ago, to do this here in the U.S. With urban kids. And so what we do is we take urban kids out of their environment for 1 week and give them Jesus. And we do it using the vehicle of sports and the tools of sports. But that's just a vehicle. What our true call is to show kids the love of Jesus for a whole week. And the kids pay a minimal cost. We have a sponsorship program where we go out to suburban churches, urban churches, anyone, parachurch organizations, and we ask those organizations to sponsor a kid for a summer and give them Jesus.
How does someone get involved in that?
We have a website. It's www.inspiresports with an S, camps with an S, .com. You can go on there. It's pretty self-explanatory as to the sponsorship. We are also looking for individual Christian companies or business owners who want to sponsor and maybe can afford a little bit more. And we would love to have you. We would love to speak to people about our passion for urban youth and underrepresented youth. And to reconquer urban America for Christ.
For
I
sure.
think we've ceded cities to the devil and to the enemy, and I think we need to recapture it. I think God, Jesus, if he were here right now, would be in the Pattersons, the Passaics, the
Right.
Camdens, the Pertan boys of the world, right there, and touching the lives of these kids that unfortunately, for whatever purposes, bad decisions, their parents' bad decisions, just worldliness, wickedness, sin, evil, and I'm not saying that's the only thing,
Right.
but I mean, there's disadvantages, and that's what we're trying to do.
Well, Sal, thank you so much for being here today. Greatly appreciated. Some good information, too. I know we have a lot more to talk about. Maybe we'll have you on again in the future sometime.
Thank you, Glenn.
No problem. And don't forget, there'll be a link to Inspire Sports Camps on tandemradio.com. Check it out. We're here every Saturday. Don't forget, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tandemradio.com. You want to get there, and you want to make sure you check it out. Tandemradio.com. It's a powerful resource to help you with your business and help you with your walk with Christ, because we are the good news on business. That's what we're all about here at Tandem Radio on the Bridge FM radio stations and on the internet. God bless you. We'll see you next week right here at the Bridge.